Put you to bed when you've had too much to drink. Oh, could be a man grows old with you.
I don't hate anybody. I'm not a hate monger. More of a hate stylist, if you will. Thank you very much.
They keep surprising me with these new video effects that we have here at Cheshire TV, with the new TriCaster and the new studio. And sadly for you, the same old me. I'm Mark, and I am the Cinemaniac. You hopefully are a Cinemaniac. We together are the titular Cinemaniacs. We're here with very few films to talk about this week, actually. I want to say thanks to Disney for locking up our screens from coast to coast. We only get one new release in the theater that I was able to find anywhere this weekend, but I saw something else in the theater last night, and I said, these two people who are watching on Facebook Live and on TV from Ghost to Ghost, they want to hear more than 4 movies being talked about, so I threw another one in there. So first up, we have a film that is the latest in the Fast and the Furious franchise I actually do not like. And this is a spin-off movie. This features 2 characters played by The Rock and Jason Statham, and they put their 2 heads together and make an ass of themselves. This is entitled Fast and the Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. So I've seen most of the Fast and the Furious movies. I like car movies. I'm not a car guy, but I like car movies, I like to drive. And I saw the first one at a drive-in thinking, cool, we're back to the days of big old badass car movies with cool stunts on the big screen. And then they gave me cartoon cars. If I wanted to see cartoon cars, I'd watch a Pixar movie. So I really didn't like Fast and the Furious because instead of seeing actual stunts that impressed me, I saw CGI things that were obviously fake doing impossible things. And I'm like, well, this is just silly. And all the macho posturing and the trash talking, I think these movies are awful. I've seen, let's say, the majority of them, and every time one comes out, for the good of the show, for you, I'll watch another one saying, maybe this time, maybe the 9th time they'll get it right. And I've never liked any of them until I saw this one. Funny enough. I went in with very low expectations, although that trailer made it look fun to me. And all I really ask at the movies is to have fun and to be able to see what the hell's going on. And this movie gives me 80% of that. I thought it was very funny. The chemistry between Statham and The Rock, which is, or Johnson, we've seen this a billion times. I hate you, we have to work together. Oh, I'll do it, but I'll do it for America. And that's kind of what this is. There's a threat to expose some great virus to across the world with some supercharged, superhuman, semi-cyborg Idris Elba, and these guys are banding together with all of their resources and cunning and wiles to stop this guy and save the world. It's very small stakes in this film. And the action is a lot of fun. I will say I think the action, not as bad as it can get these days, but kind of typical. It is thrown away. There is clearly good action choreography. The planning of the 90% CGI action is really well done, but they throw it away with how they shoot it. If you shoot a dancer, I've been told, you go to jail. If you film a dancer, you really want a full body. Gene Kelly knew that. Jackie Chan knew that. You watch a classic Jackie Chan movie, which is who set the standard for action for me, and you're yelping. You're involuntarily using profanity at how amazed you are and how dangerous and amazing this stuff looks. Even when you use CGI and wires, you want to see what these people are doing. And this is yet another action film where it's cutting mid-punch, it's cutting mid-move, things that I kind of figured out what happened, how somebody got from A to B, why those guys are suddenly on the floor. It does a not terrible job at presenting the action, but it does a not great job at presenting the action. American and international audiences have been lulled into a sense of, not being able to see what's going on equals excitement. I don't buy that. So I was really disappointed in a lot of the action. I felt like I could pause it constantly and say, no, if you had cut it this way and if you had backed up this way, the audience around me would have been squealing in delight instead of just saying, oh yeah, that's amazing again. CGI is utilized to do just really stupid and ridiculous things where, somebody has a tractor trailer corkscrewing through the air on fire with a werewolf on the back, and they lean back and it just barely misses their chin. And I'm like, that's just stupid. I don't believe anybody's in jeopardy. That's just stupid. But having said all that, this is a comic book movie. It's not based on a comic book, but this might as well be a comic book movie. This is a sci-fi action comic book comedy. This is ridiculous, and it's a hell of a lot of fun. The chemistry between the two leads, and they hate each other, but they have to work together, is fun. The film involves a third party, which is Jason Statham's sister in the film, played by Vanessa Kirby, who's outstanding and kick-ass and cool and funny, and I would be fine with a side film about her. I would be very fine with another Hobbs and Shaw movie. You can put this Fast and the Furious movies to bed as far as I'm concerned. Unless the next one features them going into space and driving dune buggies on the moon, in which case I will say bravo, give me a $15 ticket to that. I'd rather see these things because it's not all about, it's not as much about the macho posturing. It's there, but it's kind of played for laughs. This whole movie really doesn't take itself seriously. Elba is fine and good as the bad guy. Everybody in this is a heck of a lot of fun. It sort of globetrots a bit. It's a little Bondian in some ways. And it was just really funny. I mean, I was laughing out loud during this film, and I don't laugh out loud during most films that are presented to me as straight comedies. So I was very, very pleasantly surprised with this. This would be a great movie to see at a drive-in. I'm a drive-in kind of guy. But it's just big, dumb, loud, and fun for the whole family, I guess. There's a lot of profanity, but there's nothing really extremely violent or graphic in terms of any other kind of content. So I strangely would recommend Fast and Furious Presents Hobbs and Shaw. And I'm real curious to see what this franchise has going forward. Either the Fast and the Furious movies maybe being influenced by this to be a little less totally heavy-headed, moronic, dumb fun, or see more side films about these people. I will say something too. There's been a lot of talk in the last couple of weeks about stunt people and about stunt people getting more notoriety or more acclaim or actually an Academy Award for stunt work because it's an important part of the filmmaking process. And when you think of the great kick-ass, badass guys in cinema history, as far as action heroes go, you're kind of half or more thinking about their stunt person and what they did. And the new Tarantino film, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, is sort of not dredged up, that sounds negative. It sort of brought up the notion that maybe stunt people should get a little bit more recognition than they do. I think they are the superheroes of our world in terms of what they do and what they accomplish. And that's why I get so ornery when I see a movie that takes people who are literally risking their lives a lot of the time to entertain you and to make amazing things happen on screen, and they just screw it up with the camera work and the editing, and they totally throw it away. And it's like, somebody put a lot of time and effort into that and possibly shortened their life to get that little sequence done, and you're not letting the audience see what they did. It really kind of makes me mad. So that's why I plead to you, if you are somebody who makes any kind of audiovisual entertainment, do it so people can see it. Watch a Jackie Chan movie from like 1985 to 1990 and take some lessons, because that's how you do it. I saw the first two Police Story movies at the Alamo Drafthouse recently in a theatrical re-release, and the crowd was like gasping and yelping and involuntarily calling the name of their lord because they couldn't believe what they were seeing on screen. And I've heard nobody do that during 99% of Hollywood action movies that I've seen in the last 30 years. So lessons to be learned from the past, folks. So moving on, we have a film here. This is interesting. This is interesting to me. So this is a film from 1972. That's actually before I was born, if you can believe that. This is a film that was a very small, very low budget film made in Arkansas by first-time filmmakers, and it became a phenomenon. And it played theaters from coast to coast. It made its money back many times over. It started a film career for one or more of the people involved, and it haunted and terrified youths for a decade or two on TV. This film has now been restored. The filmmaker's daughter and the George Eastman House in New York have restored this film to its, I would say, original glory, but I want to say this is probably better than this has ever looked, and they are now re-releasing it to theaters. It's going on tour around the country. I'm holding off the title because this is going to be this giant surprise that I'm talking about this movie. It's touring around the country. The filmmaker's daughter is there doing Q&A before or after the film, has really cool merchandise with the film's kind of iconic poster art for sale. And I saw this at the Alamo Drafthouse Yonkers last night. If you look up the title of this film, see where you can see it locally because it's in theaters now, not on video quite yet. This is the legendary Legend of Boggy Creek. Very nice choice there. So this is a film that I had read about for years. This was listed in all the monster movie books, and it was always spoken of in hushed tones that this was this, essentially, what is this movie? So this is basically a documentary. This is a documentary, docudrama, about the Fouke monster. This was a Bigfoot-like creature that was seen for decades, if not generations, in and around Fouke, Arkansas, near Texarkana, down there in the south. And this film was made in the early 70s, and it was sort of part of the overall, you know, Bigfoot mania that was going on in the 70s. This gets lumped in with Bigfoot movies. They're not saying that that creature is a Bigfoot, but as far as it's portrayed in the film, and as far as most people are concerned, this is sort of, you know, a Sasquatch type character. And this film sort of just takes personal accounts of people who had seen this creature and had interactions with this creature in the previous decades to when this was made in '72, and a lot of reenactments. Apparently a lot of reenactments with the actual people who were involved or on the actual location. A very interesting piece of information from the filmmaker's daughter last night, that the howls that you hear in the film are allegedly actual recordings of this creature. I'm somebody who grew up in the 70s with In Search Of and all of these kind of documentaries, you know, Chariots of the Gods and stuff like that, which I always found frightening and fascinating. And I want to believe, much like the X-Files, I want to believe this stuff exists. I kind of don't, but it's fun to think about it, and it's fun to wonder. So this documentary was released in the early 70s, made for very little money, intended to be a regional film, exploded, played for years all around the country, made a lot of money for Charles B. Pierce and the investors of the film, gave Pierce a film career. He went on to do Town That Dreaded Sundown, which is a lot more well-known movie, Grey Eagle, a bunch of other sort of smallish indie films, but they played a lot. And he did a couple of Boggy Creek sequels that were narrative films. This is a documentary. He also actually co-wrote Sudden Impact, I learned last night, which is pretty cool, the Make My Day movie. Like, he wrote the "Go ahead, make my day" line. So the guy who gave you Boggy Creek gave you Clint Eastwood saying, "Go ahead, make my day." You just learned a little something on the Cinemaniacs. So this is a movie I'd long heard of, and I'd never seen it until probably the 90s. The copy I saw for the longest time, this is a very widescreen film. Looks beautiful, by the way, in this restoration. It looks really good. And it was always pan and scan on TV. And when you're talking about, you know, full like Technoscope, super wide, you're only seeing like a third of the image on TV. So if something is really well composed for a frame, whatever the aspect ratio is, and you cut part of that off, you kind of lose sense of where everything is and what's going on and all that. So it was nice to finally see this as it was intended last night. I'd never seen a good copy, and I never really liked this film. I've seen it before. I've seen it on the theater at the Mahoning DriveIn. I believe it played during Bigfoot Fest there a couple years ago. And I wanted to see it again last night to see if my opinion would change, to see what the Q&A session had in store for us afterwards, and just to see, you know, how it looked in this new 4K restoration. And I still don't like this movie, which is too bad because I love Bigfoot stuff and everything. For me, it was just kind of slow, kind of meandering. The acting, for better and worse, is mostly amateurs. So it's kind of cool to see actual people, and it gives it more of a feeling of authenticity, but it also feels like it kind of doesn't go too much of anywhere. But that's just me. There are people who love this movie. There are people who grew up with this movie. There are people who were very traumatized by this movie, and it was fun to see the scenes I've always heard people say traumatized them on the big screen last night, one of which actually did work for a lot of audience members. I heard a couple squeals and people jump, so, you know, what, 40-something years later, this film still works. For me, what was very interesting about this was seeing how simple and low budget a movie could become a phenomenon and launch somebody's career for decades. Looking back at this with modern eyes, you'd think, who would play this anywhere? And the answer was, it was a different time. People were hungry for this thing. There was a lot more mystery left in the world, and people were really eager for this sort of, as Steve Bissette would say, cryptid cinema sort of thing. And it was just fascinating to me to see this film that, to my eye, is not that great, but if you saw it at the right place and the right time and in the right mindset, it made a huge impact on you, and it is still reverberating decades later. The filmmaker's daughter, Pamela Pierce Barslow, who actually lives in New Hampshire, funny enough, strange to me, kind of cool coincidence. I meant to ask her where. She was talking about all kinds of ways that the Ralph McQuarrie artwork for the film influenced other things, including potentially Chewbacca in Star Wars. Ralph McQuarrie, if you don't know, was the concept artist for the Star Wars original trilogy and did some artwork that it's what they based a lot of the look of the film on, but also some of that wound up getting used in books and book covers and posters and album covers and stuff like that. So it was a really, really cool experience. Even though I didn't really like the movie that much, a lot of people there were very happy to see it. It's really cool that this is on tour right now. So I would say if you look up Legend of Boggy Creek 4K Tour, you'll probably find the dates where this is playing next. I know it's really playing a lot all over the place. And Miss Pierce Barslow is there selling really nice looking t-shirts and hats and merchandise, and happy to talk with anybody. So it was a really fun experience. And since we had fewer films than I expected to talk about this week, I figured, hey, why not talk about that? This is actually something that's currently in theaters, even though the movie is 2 years older than I am. But that's fresh as a daisy and young, isn't it? So that's all I have to talk about in theaters right now. I want to let everybody know that we have a Facebook page. If you're watching us on Facebook Live, you kind of figured out that we have a Facebook page. We use that to put up cool screening announcements that I find out when somebody cool is having a sale of Blu-rays or DVDs, movie news, articles that may relate to new release films, film's history, film restoration, whatever. Whatever I think is interesting that you might be interested in is on that Facebook page. And also now we are doing this. We are putting the show on via Facebook Live. Advantage of Facebook Live, I guess, to see it live, if I swear you're going to hear it. If a trailer suddenly has content that I didn't take out in advance, you get to see that. You get to see things that the people who watch this on YouTube or even people who watch this on cable might not see, because I sanitize this show before it hits the cable waves, and I have to take the trailers out for YouTube because they get copyright flags. Funny enough, last week, the trailer for... I don't even remember what it was. The trailer for something I talked about last week got a copyright claim from the National Rugby League in Australia. They claimed they owned 31 seconds of a trailer for a major blockbuster. I disputed that, and now that video is available to watch. Anyway, I got a Facebook page. We have a Facebook page. Now, we're going to move along to that which you can see on the home video, sing along if you know the words, service, platform, device, blipvert of your choice. First up is a film I saw in the theater, have not watched it again since, and I will be going on a faded and shoddy memory when talking about it. This is the first of a series of films based on, I guess it was based on a cartoon and a card game and multiple other platforms of media that was never a film until now with live action. This is what happens when a man loses his, young man loses his father, who is a cop, in this city that is sort of these weird fantasy creatures combined with normal people living together in harmony, and he has to go and try to find out who made his father disappear with the help of Detective Pikachu? So I'm not a pokey guy. I'm a Gumby guy, but not a pokey guy. So I don't know about all this stuff. I know it exists, and I know it's huge for a generation or two of kids and adults and all that, but I don't know. So I'm going into this movie knowing Pokemon was a thing. And the film felt really silly to me. It was, I mean, I'm sure if you're into the Pokemon thing, it's cool to see these things visualized in a CGI, semi-realistic 3D real-world environment and see them on this kind of, and maybe some references to what they do or other cartoons and stuff. I have no idea. For me, I went to see this movie called Pokemon Detective Pikachu. And it just, I couldn't get into it. It was all the ookie bookie and the flicky licky is going to jump up in the dingle wingle, and I just did not care whatsoever. It's a mystery. It's very similar. It felt similar to Roger Rabbit in some ways, where somebody's going into this weird town where these fantasy type things coexist with human beings, and it's like a noir film, a detective movie. Basically the idea is that Justice Smith, is his father, as I said, has disappeared or been murdered, and they're a little bit estranged, and his father was a cop, and he teams up with the Pokemon that was attached to his father, I believe, and this kid can hear the Pokemon, which is Detective Pikachu, speak English to him, where everybody else just hears Pika Pika, and the Pokemon is voiced by Ryan Reynolds. So it's supposed to be funny that you're hearing Ryan Reynolds with sort of like an intelligent voice coming out of this little Pikachu thing, and it's love and buddy and bonding and family is important and solving a crime and all that. Effects were fine. Effects were interesting. The visuals were interesting. Just for me, I was not in any way connected to the story, and I just ultimately didn't care. But your mileage may vary, as they say on that. That's out on video, I think right now, as a matter of fact. Speaking of out on video, so are the next 5 things we're going to talk about. This is a film I saw in the theater, and due to one thing or another, I never talked about it on the show, because that was a period of time where, shockingly, multiple films were allowed to come out in the theater each week, unlike right now, where we only get one at a time for the next several weeks. what am I going to talk about next week? If you have suggestions, movies@CheshireTV.org. So we're going to talk about this movie, though. This is Linda Cardellini as a mother of children. Kind of need children to be a mother, although I know people who are mothers who are guys. Anyway, this is a tale based on an old Spanish folklore, Mexican folklore, ghost story legend about the vengeful spirit of a deceased mother. What a mother, who is tries to take kids, tries to kill kids. So it's a killing kids movie, folks. This film is The Curse of La Llorona. So I love horror movies. I don't like most horror movies, but I love horror movies. It's a weird conundrum. It's like you see a few over the years that you really love and that really work on you, and you're kind of chasing that thrill for the rest of your life. You're going through crap after crap after crap after crap, and then you find one that works, and you're like, oh yeah, that's what that's like. So I watch these films, again, partly for the show, partly because I'm curious and find one that I actually like. And this is just like a typical horror movie. This is like a typical modern horror movie. It's the jump scares, it's the special effects, it's the somebody in the background that's really twitchy, it's the mouths that rubbery open too much. It's just cheesy and it's lame. I didn't like The Curse of La Llorona. I didn't like this movie. No offense to those who speak the language, because it felt like every horror movie I've seen, every mainstream horror movie I've seen for the last couple decades, that I don't find special effects scary personally. So if you give me something that's this wispy, ethereal, heavily CGI being, I'm like, hey, that's fake. Not that I think the movie is real. And when you have somebody screaming and the mouth opens real wide, I think that looks funny, actually. It doesn't look scary. And the buh isn't scary. That's, I always say, if I tickle you and you laugh, is it because you thought it was funny? No, it's a physical reaction. And the whole jump scare boo thing is garbage. It's lame and it's a cheat. And this movie kind of does that over and over again. It does set up some good atmosphere here and there. There's some moments where the cinematography and the music, and it gives you a really good kind of creepy vibe. So it's not a total loss. If you like modern horror, you might like this just fine. If you're not terribly demanding about modern horror, you may like it just fine. I just thought I was just sitting in the theater kind of rolling my eyes half the time and thinking it was kind of dull, and I knew where it was going to go, and it just becomes a whole lot of noise and a whole lot of CGI, and I'm just like, yeah, okay, can we beat the ghost this time and move on, please? So that's out on video now. I know there's at least one other film with a similar title that was rushed out on video before this, or as this was hitting theaters, one of those cash-in or earlier releases. So there may be a little marketplace confusion. If you're looking for the most recent, bigger budgeted film, it's the one with Linda Cardellini, not the one with people you've never heard of, which is usually a tip. Although those can sometimes be the better film of the two. Next up, we have what I always say is my favorite portion of the show. This is the Arrow Video Corner. This is Arrow Video, the originally UK video company that would put out, they've been around for a long time, but they really have come to specialize in horror, cult, foreign, quirky movies and do like fantastic jobs, amazing transfers, boatloads of extras, and just really great presentations. They usually come with a pretty thick book inside. And this is a film that I've seen a few times. This was a film that is from 1976, and it's sort of a low budget, not really many big stars in it at the time, but it got notoriety afterwards because Brooke Shields is in this film. I think it might have been her first film before she became really well known in other films like, Pretty Baby and Blue Lagoon and on and on and on, and the Calvin commercials and all that. She's just a little kid with kind of crooked teeth in this movie, and it is entitled Alice, Sweet Alice. That's a shocking trailer. That trailer is funny. This film was originally titled Communion, shot under the title Communion. It got re-released after Brooke Shields was more popular with the title Alice, Sweet Alice, also known as Holy Terror. And I believe the Blu-ray, this Arrow Blu-ray, has multiple opening title sequences, so you can see the other versions and what they looked like. That trailer cracks me up because it was obviously put out after Brooke Shields had done a little bit of stuff, and they pushed it again that she was the star of the movie. She's really not in this movie very much. It's sort of a cute, kind of quirky curio and other K-sounding words to see that she's in this movie, but people who were, and when I used to see this, I first found out about this because it was a budget videotape. It was thought to be public domain at least, and like Good Times Home Video and a lot of those cheap $9 video companies back in the era when videotapes were like 80 bucks. You used to see a rack of them at Kmart or Woolworth or whatever. This was always one you could afford, and it would be a cheap junky horror movies, and it had Brooke Shields all over the thing, and she's really barely in this. I've only up to now, up to this Arrow release, I've only seen this movie on video, and it was always treated as a public domain title, which usually meant crappy video transfers copied onto other crappy video transfers, and it looked ugly and gross, and it was pan and scan. And I did see a film print of this a couple times. Exhumed Films out of Philadelphia has a print, and they will occasionally show this. And that print's pretty good, but it doesn't look as good as this Arrow transfer. This looks gorgeous. It looks, I mean, it's Arrow, so you know it's gonna look fantastic. So the film looks great. It's a really good movie. I don't think a lot of people know about this. I think serious horror fans probably do. And if you've traveled in my circles to the theaters and events that I go to, you've seen Exhumed's print, so you know this movie. But it's sort of like a little lost gem to me. It basically, what is it about? It's about the film opens and there's a communion, the titular communion, and a little girl gets killed, and it gets you sort of think that it's her sister who did it. And for the rest of the movie, somebody is killing people in this yellow raincoat with a weird see-through mask and a knife or whatever implement, and you really think it's this little crazy girl doing it. Now, is it that crazy girl? Is it somebody else? Watch the film and find out. But the murders are like, they come up out of nowhere and they're shocking and they're intense. And it's not jump scare crap like we were talking about with the last movie. It's seriously intense camera work and visuals that are really shocking. Like, I've seen this movie 3 or 4 times, and when those murders came up, I was still like, eeh, wow, that's kind of strong. So I would actually call this a shocker. Now, some of the acting is better than other people in the acting department. So some of it comes off as a little cheesy. Some of the camera work isn't great, but overall this is a really well-made, little low-budget horror thriller that's really worth taking a look at if you've never seen it. Now, it's an Arrow release, so of course it's loaded with extras, more than I had time to watch. It's got a long, interview with various multiple people who were involved in the production of the film, cast members, maybe not cast members, creative people, behind-the-scenes people. So you get a history of the film and how it became to be produced and various people's role in that film. I think it has 2 or 3, perhaps, audio commentaries. It's got multiple trailers, it's got stills, it's got on and on and on. It's a couple of, you're paging through the extras. I think it's at least 2 pages worth of extras on this disc. So that is out this week, and it's really good and well worth picking up. If you're a fan of the movie, you want this because it's never looked and been presented like this before. And if you've never seen it, it's really worth checking out for fans of shockers, sort of Hitchcockian in many ways, and fans of 70s horror. It's quite good. So there's another movie to talk about. Thank you, Arrow. So here's the deal. We still have 20 minutes left and 1 film to talk about, so I'm not going to rush anything. I usually blaze through this show motormouth, Johnny Machida style, because I'm afraid I'm going to run out of time to get to the stuff I really want to talk about. This week there were so few titles I can kind of babble a little bit more, even though I'm still motormouthing it. So I spend my weekends at the Mahoning DriveIn Theater in lovely Laheyton, Pennsylvania, which is, from here it's about 6 hours from where I live. It's about an hour and a half northwest of Philadelphia, 2 hours south of New York City. It's attainable. And what we do there is we run all classic films, largest drive-in screen on the East Coast as far as I know, all classic movies, all 35. So it's all old stuff and it's all on film. And we have themed weekends, and like I'll talk about, if I have time, some upcoming stuff, but we had Home Alone weekend, Christmas in July, so we played the 2 Home Alone movies. We did Schlockorama with Exhumed Films, where it's all just weird old trashy schlock movies for 2 nights. It's a heck of a lot of fun, and it's cool to see films on film. Occasionally it's a really nice surprise when you get a print from a studio of a film that is literally as old as me, not that that's that old, you understand, and it looks perfect. And the film I'm about to talk about, that was the case. This film came from Universal, came out of the vault, original acetate print from 1974 as far as I know, and it looked phenomenal. It looked like it was a new movie, and it was really cool to be at a drive-in watching this film, experiencing this like people did when it came out, looking exactly like it did when it came out. What the hell is this movie, you may ask? Stop yapping. Okay, I will. This is a film produced by Irwin Allen. He of the disaster films like Poseidon Adventure and Towering Inferno and The Swarm and When Time Ran Out and all kinds of movies about groups of all-star casts being killed by things coming out of the sky. This is Earthquake. Very nice. And everybody dies, the end. So this was a film that I always saw on TV, on channel, I want to say channel 38 out of Boston would run this, like probably every year. That's how I saw all the Irwin Allen movies. So Earthquake and Poseidon Adventure and Towering Inferno were films that I saw pretty regularly. but I saw them pan and scan and cut for TV. Interestingly enough, when Earthquake ran on TV in 1976, I think, the premiere, they shot a whole bunch of additional footage, additional scenes with some of the characters and additional scenes with other characters to basically pad it out to be, I believe, a 2-night event. And one of the customers at the drive-in told me he remembered watching it on TV at that point, and they actually did a stereo simulcast with WNEW in New York City, if you lived in that area, and you could listen to it through your radio or stereo and crank up the sound, so when it shook, you got the full rumble-rama, simulated sense-around. Speaking of sense-around, Earthquake was one of a few movies that Universal released in a process called Sense-Around in the early 70s. It was Earthquake, it was Midway, it was Roller Coaster, Battlestar Galactica feature film, and maybe some others. It wasn't very long, it was for a year or two. And basically Sense-Around was an audio experience where they would put these giant speakers, these giant subwoofers in the theater or amongst the seats or somewhere to basically just shake the theater with a whole lot of bass. They were just like huge subs. And I've read accounts of people who saw these Sense-Around films in a theater, maybe older theaters, and they said it shook the theater so much that it caused vibrations that made ceiling tiles fall out of the ceiling. So if you could imagine watching Earthquake during a sequence where rubble is falling all over the place and all of a sudden pieces of your damn theater are falling down, that's 4D. That's the 4D experience. So we thought it was very cool at the drive-in because the print actually had, original 74 print, the print has the Sense-Around prologue on it. So at the beginning this thing comes up that says, the following feature will be presented in Sense-Around where you, the audience, feel the shaking of the earth as though, not the exact words, but it was really cool to see that bit of time travel vintage film as part of this feature, which I don't know if the video releases have that on there. I was joking that we should have charged $20 extra for everybody and have staff members shake their car during those periods. And I said I was going to go in my car and just turn up the bass to try to make my own Sense-Around. At any rate, it was fun to see this movie for the first time since I was a kid, really. And it's interesting, the Irwin Allen, he produced these films. The Irwin Allen disaster movie format was a whole lot of melodrama, a whole lot of soap opera with all the various characters, and they're usually pretty big casts in this movie. You have, and as the trailer told you, you had Lorne Greene and Charlton Heston and George Kennedy and Victoria Principal and Richard Roundtree as basically a black Evel Knievel and Gabe Dell from the Bowery Boys movies looking like a really funky 70s guy. And Walter Matthau in a great cameo that they probably shot it in about 15 minutes and they sprinkled it throughout the movie where he's basically at a drunk at a bar, knocking him back with a huge pimp hat on and wild 70s shirt and just sort of reacting to what's going on around him. Huge cast, and it's this big melodrama and soap opera, and they do that for a huge chunk of the movie. It isn't until Reel 4 that the earthquake hits. And I always said, realizing even as a kid, it's this big soap opera that happens so that when the stuff hits the fan and everybody starts dying, you actually care about these people who are being killed. So that's the format. Melodrama with little warnings of, I don't know, Seismology Institute says something big's coming. It's 4th of July weekend, it'll be fine. And then it hits and it's devastation for a while. And then the rest of the film is everybody trying to, pick up and survive and dig people out amongst aftershocks. And there's some pretty big set pieces in this film of big things, collapsing and just taking out Los Angeles and some of its iconic locations and imagery. Everybody I talked to at the drive-in really liked this movie a lot, considering it's a movie that's literally as old as I am, and which is not very old. And a lot of them had not heard of it, which I thought was interesting. This was a double feature with Twister, which is a much more recent film in my mind. It's only 20 years ago. It's recent. And it's a film that's easy to see. It's on TV a lot. And Earthquake was one that most of them hadn't heard of. And everybody that I talked to really liked it, which was kind of cool to hear that a film from that long ago, which is pretty hokey and square and slow-moving compared to Twister, which is just like a ride out of the gate, people still dug it. It's interesting to see the special effects. It's all practical effects, which means it's all models and miniatures and actual rubble and actual debris and footage from actual earthquake aftermaths, as opposed to a movie like San Andreas that came out a few years ago, which is just over-the-top, ridiculous CGI for about 98% of the film, making impossible things happen that don't ever really look real. The thing about Earthquake is, a lot of it looks pretty phony. It's from '74. It's a lot of, styrofoam and, all the stuff that was used to make debris that really didn't kill people. But it actually looked like it was there. And there were many moments in the movie where something happens and you go, ooh, because it looks like people are actually getting crushed. And it's dramatic because it looks real. It's real stuff falling on real people, and there's a sense of jeopardy. And I always feel like with CGI, most of the time, you don't get that sense of jeopardy because it just looks like a cartoon. It either looks bad or it looks so fantastical you just know it's not real. In the old days, they had to do it real, and there was always that element of danger where people could get hurt, and that usually translated to the screen and made the audience really, really invested in what's going on. CGI can be great. CGI can fool me. CGI can fool you. But a lot of times it just looks phony to me. So that's Earthquake, and that is, I bring it up at the end of the show, even though I saw it in the theater. Shout Factory has it out on video as a 2-disc set, and they have the theatrical version, which I saw just the other night, but they also have the TV version that has that, I guess, 20 minutes of extra stuff, plus commentaries and extras and all that. So if you really want to see Earthquake, I think the Shout Factory disc is probably pretty readily available to Blu-ray. It should look fantastic, and it's out there. And I'm actually really curious to see that now for the TV scenes, to see how they expand the movie and stretch it out. A movie called Black Sunday, not the Bava film, about terrorists attacking the Super Bowl with the Goodyear blimp, or a blimp. That was kind of famous for having an extremely extended version for TV that, you know, added all kinds of subplots and characters and changed certain outcomes and all that. And that was a big thing in the 70s and 80s, where you would add scenes to films that people never saw in the theater. And for the longest time, and still, those TV versions are kind of unique. Like, they've never been released on video, and some of the bits and pieces that are in them were never released on video, though I guess I presume that YouTube probably houses a lot of that stuff if you care to look for it. Okay, so I want to mention a couple things. Next week, we have yet again only a couple movies coming out. It looks like at least maybe 2 or 3 will squeak out into the theaters. We have Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, which is based on the old kids' books from the 80s or 90s, which were really just little, very short ghost stories or party games for kids that somehow has been turned into a narrative film. A lot of people younger than me are interested in that. I've seen the trailer, and it doesn't look that great to me. A movie called The Kitchen, which is about a trio, I believe, of females in the 70s in Hell's Kitchen in New York who decide to take over an element of the crime world there. And that actually looks quite good. That's got Melissa McCarthy in a dramatic role, and I find that she can be very funny. I think the movies she makes are terrible 99% of the time. But when I see her do drama, I think she's really good at it. So I'm actually kind of interested in seeing this Melissa McCarthy drama, Hell's Kitchen. And I wanted to mention, I mentioned the Mahoning DriveIn Theater. I'm not going to call anybody to action, mind you. But if you're a cine kind of guy like me, if you're a cinemaniac, if you will, and you don't know about the Mahoning DriveIn Theater, it's a drive-in theater built in 1948, opened in 49. There's a documentary about the place that this schmo is in called At the Drive-In, which you can see on Amazon Prime for free. And the DVD is available from MVD, the cool folks who give me all the Arrow stuff. And that has 3 commentaries, one of which this schmo is on, and deleted scenes and extra stuff. So there's many ways to see it. Anyway, we show old movies. We show 35mm prints like nobody does anymore, almost nobody, on the original projectors from 48. There's an open door policy in the projection booth, so if you come and visit in the snack bar, you can go right in and Jeff, the projectionist, will show you the projectors, maybe even let you hold the reel of the actual film you're going to watch that night. And we do these themed weekends, and we have some cool stuff coming up. We have the Universal Monster Mash, which is our 3rd year doing that, and it's 4 original 30s, 40s Universal Monster movies. I don't remember all the titles, but I know it's House of Frankenstein, Revenge of the Creature, one of the Mummy sequels, and something else. And we're going to have vintage trailers and Three Stooges shorts and cartoons and all kinds of stuff before the movie. We decorate the snack bar for a lot of events. JT, these master of decor there and set decoration. He'll decorate the snack bar themed to the movie, and you have cool photo ops where it looks like you're in a scene from the movie or with one of the characters from the movie. That'll be a good time. We have Camp Blood coming up. It's one of our annual huge events that Exhumed Films puts on with us, and that is usually camping-themed horror or slasher films. Usually 3 per night for 2 nights. People camp out, set up tents, which you can do at the drive-in, and stay all weekend and have a blast. Jill Sholin, who was in the Robert Englund Phantom of the Opera and Cutting Class and a lot of other, The Stepfather, a lot of 80s horror movies. She's going to be there signing autographs and talking to people and hanging out. We're going to show several of her films, including Popcorn, The Stepfather. I think we're showing Friday the 13th Part 3, not in 3D. What else? Cutting Class and a bunch of others. It's all on Facebook. That's a really good time. We get a lot of people who come from around the country and Canada to go to that show. We have Woodstock weekend, August 16th and 17th, the actual anniversary of the Woodstock concert in '69. For the 50th anniversary, we're showing the Woodstock movie on film on the big screen both nights, and we're going to have bands playing all day. So it ain't no Woodstock, but it's going to be a music festival with the Woodstock movie playing, and that's going to be kind of fun. And then we have something called Teens Gone Wild Weekend. That is also with Exhumed Films, and that is 2 days of teen sex comedy triple features from the 80s with Mike McPadden, who did the new book, Teen Movie Hell, that I reviewed a while ago on here, which was a guide to 70s, 80s teen sex comedies. He's going to be there with copies of his book and just hanging out and introducing the movies. And we're going to show these silly 80s teen sex comedies like Joysticks and King Frat and maybe Revenge of the Nerds and some other things. That should be a heck of a lot of fun. Good old bonehead 80s throwback weekend. Anyway, that's where I go in the weekend. I have a great time there, and it's try to like sing the praises of the place so more people know about it, because I see new people there every weekend and they love it so much, and they always thank me, the guy who takes their money at the cash register for some reason. Happy to do it. Anyway, we're winding down. I'm just filling time at this point. Next week we'll be back with whatever is new in the theater, and if I see anything else, I don't think there's an Arrow release next weekend, so it may be even more babbling like this. Until then, I am Mark, and I will see you at the movies.